Hello and welcome to another episode of Discover with Spinati. You are tuning in to the 132nd episode straight, day after day, not skipping a beat. Today we're talking about, again, we're talking about how to overcome the obstacles, but most importantly, we're talking about imagine being the first person to ... do anything. Because if you are the first person to do anything, it takes a tremendous amount of self-belief, and that's what we're starting today. We're actually going to shift, as I always do, to something that precedes that, which is the doubt from yourself and the doubt from others, but more than likely the doubt from your own self. If you can overcome the doubt from your own self, then obviously you can overcome the doubt of anybody. If you are overweight, the majority of people are going to look at you and say, you cannot achieve because you've always been overweight, you've always been fat. The likelihood of you actually achieving a thin or a fit body is highly improbable because you've developed so many habits and you have to break them. It's very difficult, right? So the number one thing is that once you set yourself into a belief system, then nothing can stop you. So the thing is, the premise here is there are several people in history, present in the past, who have overcome insurmountable odds in order for them to prove to others and mainly to themselves, but that anything is achievable. And I have a few examples and I'm going to run through them. But before I do, when you first encounter the thought, the doubt that you cannot do it, that you're not good enough, that you are missing something, that there's something in you that is wrong, if you are inculcating that in your mind, if you are actually imprinting that in your mind and you are rehearsing it, and this is your mantra, then it's time for you to snap out of it, okay? Because you're actually hurting yourself. Now, if you're hearing it from other people because you're putting in a lot of effort and people are seeing it and they're getting uncomfortable seeing you put in a lot of effort, and now they're starting to say things, well, I have some good things for you in this podcast. So the first example that I have is Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister in the 1950s decided that he wanted to break the record of the 4-minute mile. The 4-minute mile, meaning running a mile in 4 minutes or under 4 minutes, was an impossible task. And this wasn't just like, anyone kind of like gathering in a lounge or in someone's house or, just kind of like friends gathering around and talking. No, we're talking experts, like experts in the field, in physiology, in physics, saying that it is impossible for a human being, to run faster than 4 minutes when they're running a mile. And he did it. And the funny thing is that like no one thinks about this part, like the mental aspect, right? Because the amount of belief that you have to have this kind of blind self-belief. And that's what it is. That's the whole theme of today, is that you have to have this blind belief. You can call it delusion, you can call it whatever you want, but the words, these like negative words, the delusion, the fanciful thinking, the whatever, these like negative terms, they're created by people who don't believe in themselves. You will never hear someone who's actually achieved a significant amount of achievement. You'll never hear them say delusional. You'll never hear them say fanciful. You'll never hear them say impossible. You'll never hear it from those people, if you are lucky enough to actually encounter those kind of people, because those people had to go through that mental exercise for them to say, it doesn't matter if no one believes it. It doesn't matter if I don't even believe it internally. I'm still going to do it because I know I can get it done. That is the thing that Roger Bannister had to actually go through. He had to go through not just criticism from just random people. He had to go through professional proof. When someone shows you stats and studies and says, look, it's never been done before, it's impossible, it's a human impossibility, and they show you, like they shove the paper in your face, the studies, study after study. Imagine that. And you're looking at it and you're reading it and you're like, yeah, we're not meant to actually run faster than 4 minutes if we're running a mile. It's impossible. But imagine being so stubborn, so hard-headed, that you're like, I'm going to get it done. And I'm going to find a way and I'm going to get it done. And then check this out. This is the fantastic part, is that once Roger Bannister broke it. Thousands that year. Actually, it was hundreds that year, but still were able to break it. It's because they saw someone else do it. They saw that it was possible, right? So now it changed their belief system and now they were able to do it. Where previously it wasn't even on the radar of possibilities. Like, just think about that. I'm not even like talking about, like you're not shooting in the pool and you're like, oh yeah, like that's not going to happen. No, no, no. We're talking about science here. Okay. You broke science. You broke science's back. So that's number one. Number two, 27 years in prison. Can you think of who that person is? 27 years in prison? 27 years in prison and gets out of prison and becomes the first Black president of South Africa. Yes, I'm talking about Nelson Mandela. Now, if you think to yourself right now that you're in a bad situation, you need some kind of motivation, you're whatever you're stuck in currently, and then compare yourself to someone who's been imprisoned unjustly, mind you, for no fault of his own, right? Like, I'm sure you wake up some days and you're like, why is this happening to me? I don't deserve it and all that stuff, right? Well, imagine being imprisoned for 27 years for something you didn't do. And then you get out and then you become the president of that place that put you in prison. That's enough to boggle your mind. Now, the amount of belief and the amount of obstacles that this person, any person, has to go through. 27 years. We're not talking 27 days. We're not talking 27 weeks. We're not talking, 2 years, 3 years, 27 years. Like, you're losing the most fruitful years of your life. And then you get out, but you still overcome the hurdles to become the president. You use that as leverage. You use the circumstances, the bad circumstances, and I don't know what's worse, to be imprisoned unjustly for 27 years. Then obviously if you lose your health, it's worse, but we're not talking about that right now. We're assuming we're in good health, okay? Because, as they say that when you're healthy, you have 1,000 wishes. When you are sick, you only have one wish, which is to get healthy. So if you are healthy, but you are obviously stuck in your mind, this perspective is good, because you have to think about it. If someone is in prison for 27 years, there is nothing worse for a human being to experience than unjustly being imprisoned for 27 years and losing the most productive years of their life, the youth of their life, the prime of their life, and then getting out and still achieving a phenomenal achievement, which is being the first Black president. Like, the first Black president. So he overcame so many odds and had to overcome so many obstacles and had to overcome so many people who would basically tell him you can't do it, and had to overcome his own defeating self-belief. So, another one for you. Someone who lost their hearing in their late 20s and becomes one of the most revered classical musicians in history. Can you think of it? Here's a hint. Ninth Symphony. Yes, Beethoven. Beethoven lost his hearing in his late 20s. Lost his hearing, yet he became one of the most renowned musicians in history. Okay, so what's worse in your own field, right? Obviously, musicians require their hearing for them to produce things that are actually sound good, right? I mean, that's the whole point. Now, imagine losing that faculty and yet finding some way for you to still not only win, but become the best and become an example for those people who have their hearing, right? Like, if you stack up everything against someone, like for instance, losing their hearing or going to prison for 27 years or having science say you can't do something, but yet you're still pushing against and trying to find a way, and you find a way because you're stubborn headed and you will not accept no for an answer. The answer is simple. You win. Okay. So that's another example. And by the way, history is replete with these kind of examples. I'm just mentioning a few. Okay. And another one. This is one of my favorite ones. Okay. 7 years of failures. year after year after year, 7 years of doing your absolute best, of people saying that you're good. People are not saying you're not good. People are saying you're good, but you're not the best. And so you're not going to become successful. Now, who am I talking about? None other than Michael Jordan. Yes, when he got into the NBA, people said he was good, of course, but they said that he wasn't as good as Magic Johnson or Larry Bird. However, people like that, like Michael Jordan, Nelson Mandela, like Roger Bannister, they are people like Beethoven. They are people that when people look at them and they see them try, and obviously they're going to criticize them, when they hear people saying about them that you cannot do it, you're not going to win, or he's not going to win, or they publish news articles saying, he's not as good as, they don't get down on that. They actually take that as fuel. So, and obviously, the story of Michael Jordan, that he used it as fuel in order for him to find a way to win. And he found a way to win, and he won 6 championships. And he is arguably probably the best basketball player in history. Last but certainly not least, chess grandmaster Magnus Carlsen. So the story of Magnus is really is along the same theme. Okay, so he's known to be really good, and he's known to be one of the best, or I think some people say even the best grandmaster in chess in history. Nevertheless, when he was in tournaments, he got into a tournament once, and as he was going into the tournament, he heard the broadcaster saying that this is the game that he is going to lose, okay, because he was facing a tough opponent. And so the broadcasters were saying, look, like, his chances of winning are very slim. So what he did was, and he overheard that. They didn't know that he was there to overhear it, but he did. He overheard it, and then he won the game. At the end of the game, when they interviewed him, right, he's saying, oh, it was a tough game, blah, 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 but I found a way, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of it, he said, by the way, I heard you say that I was going to lose the game. And then they kind of got flustered and they said, oh, well, just something we have to say to keep it interesting. He said, oh, don't worry. I actually used it as fuel for beating my opponent. So here's the takeaway of this whole podcast for today, is that when you hear yourself criticize yourself, when you hear other people criticize yourself, when people see you actually try, right? People see you try and they start criticizing, whether you hear it or you don't. You have 2 options. Either 1, you give into it, or either 2, you take it as a motivating factor, as fire to motivate yourself to prove them wrong. Because like all the examples I mentioned today, Roger Bannister, Nelson Mandela, Beethoven, Michael Jordan, Magnus Carlsen, and so many others, they are the people who took that criticism and said, all right, I'm going to prove you wrong. And then they did. Whereas the majority of people, they give in and they say, yeah, well, I guess they're right. And then they start justifying their failures. So you choose. Choose wisely, my friends, and have yourself a wonderful day. Keep smiling.